Citizen Advisory Committee for the City of Lowell for our regular meeting of Monday, May 13th, 2019. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sue, roll call, please.
Commissioner Cadwalder.
Here.
Commissioner Chambers.
Here.
Commissioner Blank.
Here.
Commissioner Schraven.
Here.
Commissioner Ellis will be absent tonight, and Chair Barker.
Here. Thank you. Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda? Oh, well, do
Motion for the absence.
Yeah, go ahead, and make a motion.
Motion for the absence.
Yeah,
Support.
and second?
Support.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Tony stands excused, sorry about that. Now I need a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve as is.
And support?
I'll support.
And any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The agenda stands accepted. Now I'd like an approval, or a motion for the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, April 8th, our regular meeting.
I'll make a motion that we approve those.
I can support.
And discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are accepted. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Old business. A is Airbnb John Barr, 2179 G Drive. Andy, would you walk us through that, please?
Yes. If you recall, last year, Mr. Barr submitted an application for a short-term rental, which the city regulates through the special land use process, and his house is located on G Drive. So if you recall, went through the application and review process with him. It was ultimately approved with conditions. One of those conditions was that the special land use would be reviewed annually by the planning commission. And it's not so much a review in that you have to take action and specifically renew or extend the special land use, but it's primarily an opportunity because there were some comments from concerned neighbors and the public, an opportunity for the planning commission to hear from the applicant and see how it's going, follow up internally and see if there have been any complaints, what actions have been taken, things like that. So that's the purpose of this. It's at this point, it's merely a discussion point for you guys to review. If there are issues that folks are aware of, then the planning commission could impose additional conditions, which we'll get to here in a minute. So we asked, actually we didn't ask, he provided a letter to the planning commission that kind of discusses how things have gone on in the last year. There have been some complaints, so we followed up with Police Chief Buchla, who responded back to that. They did not issue any citations or anything like that to Mr. Barr ultimately. It sounds like, from his view, it didn't sound like there were any violations of the permit from Mr. Barr. So that's kind of where this is at. So it's open for planning commission discussion and questions and things like that at this point. I think according to the conditions, we have to do this, I think it's annually.
Yes, it is.
So every year about this time of year, we'll have a conversation looking for Mr. Barr, either in person or in writing. He's out of town a lot, so he's not always able to just swing on over, but
Part of this was that this was the initial Airbnb case.
yeah, this was the first one.
This is the first one we
We
really.
made across the street, the same thing.
Yeah,
They'll be
but
here.
I'm just saying, this was the
Yep.
original one, and that's
Yep.
why we asked for it, because we weren't sure if the ordinance was working the way it's supposed to be and all those kinds of things. So I think that was the reasoning behind it for background.
And he's asking for more parking spaces too, is that what?
Yeah. And We granted him 5 parking spaces, and I believe that there is 6, I better look this up. I think that they allow a maximum of 10 guests at a time.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he's asking.
We said 5 parking spaces. Now, to me, adding any, I see no reason to do it, frankly. That's my own opinion.
Well, I think he's got a neighbor who's hopping over and.
Right.
And
Yeah, from the sounds of the letter, yeah.
Yeah.
Saying,
Yeah.
You got too many cars in your.
Now, what I could see is extending that possibly maybe to 6 or 7 daytime, but be going back down to 5 by 9 o'clock. I don't know, and that's a lot of policing for
Yeah,
what?
then, okay, 801, kind of
Yeah.
look, yeah.
And if this is the only complaint that, this neighbor has complained about another house over there too, evidently, so my feeling is it seems to be working, and I don't know that I would change it.
No, because Chief's been up there and didn't seem to have a problem with anything that was
Correct.
there. And-
Yeah. I mean, the location, and he's absolutely right, where the driveway is situated and how it's situated, you could have, 8 cars up there without a problem. I'm not saying that, but it seems to me as though 10 guests, 5 cars seems reasonable.
Yeah. Plus, not everybody's driving themselves.
Because part of it is it's a neighborhood. You don't want to have 10 cars going up and down, making, just drive a car up and down the street. I mean, why would you want to encourage that? I don't think anybody would like to see that, frankly. If I was a neighbor, I would be upset about it.
It isn't far for Myers, they can carpool.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, that's also true. So do we want to deny him or just let him know that we're staying with our 5 cars?
Sure.
Do we have to do anything formally or?
I don't think so. I mean, as long as I think if the minutes show that there's a consensus that the planning commission agreed that 5 cars is acceptable, you're not inclined to increase it to 8, then we can communicate that to him tomorrow.
Okay, and I guess we can take a look at it for another year. We're going to revisit it in a year's time and see where it stands.
And he's using the garage too as a few cars,
Yeah.
right?
No, I don't
We're
think
just
so.
allowing an outdoor.
Yeah,
parking
just
for
the
5
outdoor.
cars.
Yeah, yeah,
So if he can fit 2 in the garage, so he's probably hiding a couple more there.
yeah.
Which is fine, as
Right.
long as they're not sitting out.
Yeah, I mean, it could be his cars, we don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know, but if they use the garage, like it's
Yeah,
2 stall or whatever, that brings it up to 7.
regardless, I think 10 people, 5 cars seems reasonable.
Yeah.
I don't see any great reason to change it. 1 complaint, 2 complaints, whatever, it just doesn't.
You were gonna get complaints probably.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And if we change it for that, then aren't we gonna do it for the next person, and
No.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So, do we need to take a vote on it, or?
Just as is, the way it was. I mean,
If he didn't fill out an application or formally request anything other than he just kind of said, hey,
Well, informally then, can you inform him that we are staying with that
Yes.
5 car at this
Yes.
point? He's, feel free to bring it up next year again,
yes,
if there's been any change in the situation or anything along that line.
yeah, we can do that.
If we can get a clean year in, then we can take a look at it maybe, but let's get one clean year in.
Yeah, well, and I think too, I mean, we'll have to be mindful of the nature of the request. I mean, anybody can complain just for the sake of complaining, so I don't know the merits of the complaints themselves,
So,
so.
same neighbor complained about another neighbor over there.
Yeah, so if the city finds that while there have been complaints, if they're essentially without merit, then,
Right.
you can,
Right.
planning commission can certainly
Yeah.
overlook that, and then if you want to increase it next year, then.
Yeah, because I just go off from what Chief's notes, and,
Right, he didn't see any problem.
that's who we have to,
he's the one going up there.
Yep.
Checking everything
They
out.
are the enforcing entity in the city, so they would be, they'd be the ones that would have the written information.
yep, and he didn't, other than this one about the trespassing, that's the neighbor coming on,
Correct,
and they got trail cams now, so.
yeah. Oh, yeah, The other neighbor has trail cams, so it's,
Yeah, so if they catch him on it, I guess.
yeah. I just, I don't see any problem with Mr. Barr. It seems as though he's doing everything we've asked him to do. I just don't see any reason to change it as far as that goes. So, any other thoughts on this, commissioners? Then if you'll notify him and we'll do that. Okay. Old business, recreational marijuana ordinance discussion. I'm going to go through the
Yes.
updates.
We have provided to you, there's a cover memo dated May 6th. That just kind of outlines some of the changes and updates that we've made to the city's draft recreational marijuana ordinance. And so again, starting on the second page here, it says page 1 at the bottom. It's the first page of what the amendment would look like. Most of this is substantially similar or exactly the same as what it was last month. So all of these definitions are the same on page 1. The zoning districts on page 2, about halfway down there when we start talking about that, that is unchanged as of right now. So just to kind of recap for everybody, recreational marijuana facilities would be permitted in the C3 district, light industrial, and then River's Edge. In section 17.04, we have a new subsection FF, which is the special land use chapter. This would be a new subsection. So this is the use specific requirements in the zoning ordinance that would apply only to recreational marijuana establishments. We went through most of this last meeting, so Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want me to kind of go through this again. Or
I
just
think
kind of
we're okay with
highlight.
that. I do have a question on page 3,
Mhm.
3B, consent.
Mhm.
And towards the end there, it says, written consent shall also include approval of the owner and operator for the city to inspect the facility at any time during normal business hours to ensure compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Do we do the same thing for other businesses?
We do
Not-
for liquor control.
What's that?
For liquor control,
For
we
liquor
do.
we do?
Liquor
Okay.
control we do. Okay.
I mean, there is something
So
on,
there's some logic then to include it.
yes, I think so.
Plus the fire inspector does do fire inspections, so that's,
Right, yeah, well, that would make total sense. I just didn't want to put it out there that we are doing additional inspections, you know, just because it's marijuana.
Yeah.
But as long as it's liquor control and, you know, things like that, that would make, I would assume the same would happen with fireworks or something like that.
correct.
Okay, I'm okay with that,
Okay.
sorry.
So well, I guess we'll back up a little bit here. So just to follow the structure of the ordinance, the first section sets out the purpose and intent. Item 2 requires a license, so this requires one to not only get a special land use permit, but to concurrently get a license from the city council. And it is my understanding that they're working on that, or will be working on that shortly to get something drafted, so both of these ordinances could be adopted by the council at the same time, because we don't know when the state is going to formally publish those rules, and once they do that, then that would open the door for applicants to start coming in and they would start accepting those applications.
What's the sequence there? Do they go to the city for the for the license?
Isn't it the
First and then
state
come here?
first, Mike, and then to us?
Yeah, they have to get approved by the state.
State first, and then it would be the city, and then planning commission, I would think. I mean, there's no sense coming here if they don't have the other.
We have to think about that a little bit. I've had a couple of conversations with city attorneys about this because I'm not entirely I think it kind of has to be both. There has to be some kind of process that we'll need to figure out internally on how to process them, because once you get licensed by the state, there's going to be a limited number of locations where these can go.
Right.
And, you know, also there's going to be, in theory, I think anyways, probably some kind of overall limit on the number that would be permitted. So I think that it's going to be important for the city to make sure that the process allows for the most efficient one, so that we don't have, you know, a bunch of different applicants applying. You know, if we have 10 people coming in that says, yep, I got my city council license, and there's physically not 10 places they can go in the city, then we're just wasting people's time and money. So we need to figure out procedurally what the best way to go is, and I haven't quite figured that out yet.
Okay, I was thinking just somewhat the opposite.
Mhm.
Why come here before this if they end up, the city saying, nah, no,
Right.
I don't care. And then they spend all the time here and money and all that, and then,
Right.
you know, which one, chicken or egg, I understand.
Yeah.
I assume you're working on that with the attorney. And I also assume this allows us to pass an ordinance because it simply says that you have to have both. It doesn't give you a sequence.
Correct. So as we work with council and the attorneys on kind of figuring this out, I think the regulatory ordinance will probably set up a process as far as how this goes. And this, in a couple of different places, you'll see this ordinance references back to this general law ordinance, and that's the one that's going to have most of the really, the more detailed operational things.
Right.
As far as setting the number on the, you know, what the cap is on the number of establishments
Oh, it's chosen.
permitted and all, the chosen, all the criteria, that's outside of zoning, that's not really what we're going to worry about here at the planning.
Okay.
So subsections 3 and 4, starting on page 3 and continuing on to page 4, talk about the application process. So subsection 3 talks about what's required to apply, and subsection 4 references in the site plan review chapter. So obviously anybody proposing to do this, like anyone else, would have to come in with a site plan, and they will have to give us a few additional pieces of information here, none of which will be particularly difficult for them to provide. Item 5, starting halfway down on page 4, is general provision. So this is just sort of the general, some of the land use based operational things. So a few things that we added here from the previous meeting or from additional revisions in our office. We added a couple items here under security. Under item B, separation distances. At the last meeting, we talked about whether we should be measuring these isolation radius from the property or from the building itself. And so you decided that the nearest point of the establishment of the actual physical building would be the point where we would measure from, not the property line. So we added that language in here. And then on the top of page 5, we added this.
Andy, before you go there.
Yep.
5 general provisions, B, you got 1,000 feet of preschool or child care center. I know the 1,000 foot of the preschool, but I do not remember if we did. I was out there and I wasn't paying attention, but the child care center,
Mm-hmm.
that would be like daycare?
Yes.
Okay,
Like-
I don't
like-
remember.
Yeah, so that's one that we talked about at the council and planning commission joint meeting. We talked about preschools. So like when I say daycare, I don't mean daycare as in like one that's within somebody's house where there's like 5 or 6 kids. This would be the larger daycares, like something like
Like the one
that.
across from Myers and,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, but when I read that, I took it as
Like one of the.
like a homeowner.
Yeah.
So,
That
We have
language,
daycares everywhere.
yeah,
yeah, well, that language is specific to the ordinance. So there are 3 types of child care centers. There's what the ordinance calls a child care family home, which is 1 to 6 kids. There's a child care group home, which is 7 to 12. Both of those are the types of daycares that are within somebody's personal residence, which would not fall under the purview of a child care center. The child care center, as defined in the ordinance, is only a commercial type of establishment,
Okay.
like an amphitheater or something. So.
okay. But that was my confusion when I read that, because I know we talked about the large ones, but to me, that meant,
Right, that would change things
Yeah.
quite a bit.
and that's why I
No,
thought, okay, well,
Yeah.
And further up there, the nearest point of the establishment, I'm not sure that I recall that we did it to the establishment or to the property line.
to the establishment.
Yeah, to the establishment, to the
Yeah.
actual building, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
And then on top of page 5, a couple other things that we added here. So we talked about, basically with the way that those isolation radii were drawn previously, that it ended up with a very small little section of that C2 downtown district that the city wanted to exclude that area near downtown for these. So we added language that would also prohibit it within 500 feet of your property within the C2 district. They put together a map just so you can see what that'll look like, and I'll plug in real quick here so you can see it. But as one would expect, it does eliminate the area downtown. So this red hatched area, here, I'll zoom in a little bit for you.
Almost there.
Yep. So you can see the only eligible properties left here would be, these are King Milling down here. This would be the only stuff left. There would be nothing zoned C2 that would be allowed, and nothing within 500 feet of that. So that more completely eliminates everything in and around downtown from the eligible properties. And I did put together one more map to kind of show you. I know, Marty, you asked for a little more clarity as far as where these boundaries are.
Yep.
So this one in particular is kind of the most interesting one here. So I got one more map with an arrow that I'm going to show you. So you can see exactly where this lies.
Yes.
So this pink here is your C3 zoning.
Okay.
And this up here is obviously the buffer, so anything that's in pink here this is a possible location. So for reference, this is Bet and Baker right here. So obviously these 3 buildings are gone, they're being replaced by the one larger building. I don't know why this big red or big white stripes.
Oh, but that's exactly what I was asking
Okay,
to see.
good.
Because that cleared up that whole, because that black line, I mean, that could be 100 foot when you scale it.
Right.
So,
yeah, this shows a little bit more clearly, and obviously anything C3 and to the west of this up here would all be eligible for a marijuana establishment.
So the major area starts on Center and Main,
Pretty much.
and then goes west of there,
Yep. So anything west of there would, in theory,
for the most part.
be open to application.
So,
I mean, there are spots in there, obviously, Valley Vista and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a neat picture, because if you zoom in on, right here,
Oh.
half of his property technically falls into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, and this is where it gets a little unusual with these kinds of exercises that you have.
Right.
If someone sites the building back here in this corner, then okay, maybe it would work. If someone has a building in the rear back here, that
Right.
could work. That is a little unusual, but that's what the map shows. So if we're going to be measuring from, and this ties back to that previous discussion from last month, if we're going to be measuring these from the corner of the building and not from the parcel line, this pretty clearly shows that some parcels are going to be half in and half out, but depending on how you site the building itself, you might still be okay, even though part of the property is within that radius. So as long as you're comfortable with that,
Yep.
I think
Well, we
that's
knew that was
fine.
going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you put it. It's
Right.
still good.
So,
And in the submittal requirements, we're also requiring the applicant to put together a similar map that shows those facilities within 500 or 1,000 feet. So if something changes over time and someone builds a new school or preschool or something somewhere, that map, this map might not be accurate in 15 years or something, as things
Right.
develop. So
okay.
we will continue that. The last thing that we added here is this exception, which is right top of page 5, right underneath where it says within 500 feet of a property within the C2 district. Basically, if marijuana establishment is there first and then someone builds a school there later, which I feel like is unlikely, this would allow the marijuana establishment to continue because it was there first. And there's a similar provision, I know, when it comes to citing, bars and taverns and things like that. So obviously, we'll have the attorneys take a good look at that provision because it's, not covered in the act, but a lot of things aren't, but we'll have to make sure that that's okay. A few other items that we included here just for updating here. So we have item 3, we gave some examples of what negative air pressure could be based on what our research in other communities has sort of discovered as some actual numeric values we can assign to those things. And on page 6, we added some language here suggested by the attorney that in the event of a conflict, terms of this ordinance are preempted and controlling authority shall be the state and their rules. So if there's some instance where these rules conflicts with the states, then the states would obviously control.
Okay.
And I think that's about it. So if you guys have further questions, I'd be happy to take them. Where we'll go from here is if you are comfortable with how this looks now, we will put it in an ordinance format. So it'll look like an ordinance, and we could, I think, schedule a public hearing for the next meeting if you're ready to do that. And that way, when you recommend it to council, I think what would be best is council can keep it for as long as they want. Then when they have a general law ordinance drafted, I think what they'd want to do is adopt them both at the same time, one motion after the other, adopt both ordinances.
As part of this ordinance, we can't put in there until they adopt theirs.
Right, and so it makes sense to have them done concurrently. And so if the rules from the state come out early, which I've been hearing they might, you're not waiting around for 2 weeks while there's this huge gap where there's no control whatsoever. So that way council could be prepared to act fairly quickly once they have them both adopted and ready to go.
Does this format get run by the attorneys before the?
Oh, yes.
So that'll be before the public hearing?
Yep, I've been sending them drafts for the last 2 months. They've taken a look at both of these and made some suggestions. So when I put it in ordinance format, I'll look at it again. And I will work out with them procedurally how we should proceed with these. And then if necessary, we'll build that into this ordinance, or it might end up that we just put the whole procedure in the other ordinance. We'll just kind of see what they think.
Well, they want to do it.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any other questions on this then? I don't think we have to vote, but I would say that I think it's unanimous that we would just as soon have the general ordinance and do the public hearing a month from now, correct? Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Put it on. Next item here is the new business, which is 2560 Bose, which is a site plan review. Maybe you want to walk us through, and there is a letter here. Everybody should have gotten a letter from VP Fiber at your desk there.
Yep, so if you recall, at a couple meetings ago, Lowell Township and Virgin's Broadband, I think the township asked for the rezoning of this property at 2560 Bose Road. It was zoned industrial. They wanted it zoned public facilities. It's adjacent to the new township park. And so the intent here, they submitted back in April just a zoning compliance permit to build an accessory building. And the last meeting, the planning commission felt like it should come here for a site plan review, which is what we would recommend for basically anything else. And so this is a very small building on a very small parcel, so therefore it is a very simple application and relatively short report from us. So what they have proposed here is just a small, very small 12 by 24 utility building, which would be within an easement on the southern portion of this property. So it's kind of a triangular shaped property on the west side of Bowles Road. The western boundary of the property is the city limits, and then the very next parcel is the Virginia Township Park. So there's just this very small accessory building on the property that would be used jointly by Lowell Township and Virginia's Broadband. So we just put together just a typical kind of site plan review outline for your consideration. This is a little bit unique because most of the typical kind of site plan stuff that we would look at for an application like this just doesn't apply, right? I mean, we're not, setbacks are fine. They would apply, but they're certainly satisfied. Lighting, it says here, I'm just reading this letter from Virginia Broadband. They didn't have anything in lighting on their plan. They just have motion activated lighting on the building itself, which they're allowed to do. There will evidently be signage for the building, which we'll need to look at, and we'll take that as it comes. So it's pretty common for someone to say, yeah, we'll have a sign, and then staff will just look at that at a later date to make sure that it complies with the zoning ordinance. Parking is not going to be necessary, doesn't look like. I gotta read this real quick.
Yeah, they received permission from Light Power to use the existing drag and parking area. And then they've also received permission from Lowell Township to access those buildings from its parking lot. The only question I would have, I guess, in regard to that is the access, is what's being stored, and they said it's electrical equipment and stuff for the park. My only question is there anything flammable or things like that where fire could, and then can a fire truck get in there? And that would be my only question.
Yeah, those are questions too. The application didn't have a lot of detail to it. It looks, just in reading through here, it says Virginia Broadband will use the facility to house fiber optic internet networking infrastructure. Lowell Township proposes to use the facility to store landscaping and related supplies for its neighboring park. So, I don't. It doesn't sound like there's anything. Obviously, there's going to be networking infrastructure. There's going to be plenty of electricity and electrical components in there. Beyond that, it sounds like no, but we can certainly refer this, and I think we have in our list of conditions to refer this to the fire department just for.
Yeah, we might, under number 5 there, under the recommendation, we might want to put in the fire department there. I know you have the Department of Public Works and city engineer or other city officials, but we might specifically want to mention, make sure the fire department is satisfied.
Okay. Access we've talked about a little bit already, and it looks like they also added some information for us here about the materials, which they said shingled roof and steel siding with ledge stone, cultured stone. And they write that while its function will be utilitarian in nature, the building aesthetics will be appropriate for the area and comparable to the existing building. I generally agree with that, given the materials they listed here. Then again, landscaping, again, the original application didn't propose much landscaping. They have some type of stone, bark, and possibly shrubbery. So again, just basic around the base of the building. It sounds like they'll have some pretty straightforward mulch and landscaping. Again, none is required for something this small. But if they're going to do some landscaping around the base of the building, I think that would be fine. In the site plan review standards, Mr. Chairman, do you want to walk through these one at a time?
Sure, let's, yeah, like we typically do. Let's follow the format here, so.
So this is section 1809 in the zoning ordinance, subsection A states that the uses proposed will not adversely impact the public health, safety, or welfare. Uses and structures located on the site shall be planned to take into account topography, size of the property, uses on any adjoining property, and the relationship and size of buildings to the site. Site shall be developed so as not to impede the normal and orderly development or improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in this ordinance. We wrote that the building is so small that it'll have little to no impact on any of the above factors that they list here.
Commissioners, all in favor of accepting the site plan review standard A? Is there any questions, I guess, first of all? And then secondary, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Standard is accepted.
Item B, safe, convenient, uncongested, and well-defined vehicular and pedestrian circulation shall be provided for ingress and egress points and within the site. Drives, streets, and other circulation routes shall be designed to promote safe and efficient traffic operations within the site and at ingress/egress points. I think we talked about parking and access already. Obviously, as far as pedestrian circulation is concerned, there's not really any pedestrian infrastructure or activity in the area. So we don't have any concerns there, and they've answered some of our questions about access and parking.
Again, Commissioners, any questions? All in favor of accepting the standard B, please say aye.
Aye.
Standard is accepted.
Item C, the arrangement of public or private vehicular and pedestrian connections to existing or planned streets in the area shall be planned to provide a safe and efficient circulation system for traffic within the city of Lowell. Again, there's nothing proposed as far as future streets. The existing streets, again, there's very little additional access that's needed to Bowes Road, which is the only street right in that area that has access to property can be accessed through the park, which I think is what's going to happen most of the time.
And again, they could come back before us if they want to put something in or make any changes. So,
Absolutely.
Commissioners, all in favor, or any questions on standard C? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting standard C, please say aye.
Aye.
Standard is accepted.
Item D, the removal or alteration of significant natural features shall be restricted to those areas which are reasonably necessary to develop the site in accordance with the requirements of this ordinance. Planning Commission requires that approved landscaping buffer and indoor green belts shall be continuously maintained to ensure that proposed uses will be adequately buffered from one another and from surrounding property, public and private property. The site itself is pretty open. There's a couple of trees on it, but that's about it. So there are not any known natural features on that site that we're aware of, and I don't think that there would be any significant impact from such a small building.
Commissioners, any questions on standard D? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Standard D is accepted.
Item E, satisfactory assurance shall be provided that the requirements of all other applicable ordinances, codes, and requirements of the city of Lowell will be met. This, I think, could be handled as a condition of approval if you are inclined to approve it. And given the information provided from Jen's broadband, I think that they certainly intend to comply.
Again, the only question I have is flammable, and I would prefer that we add and specifically add in the fire department as signing off on the project. Other than that, any other questions? Hearing none, with that exception, all in favor of accepting standard E, please say aye.
Aye.
Standard E is accepted.
And the last matter, item F, the general purposes and spirit of this ordinance and the comprehensive plan of the city of Lowell shall be maintained. The master plan shows this property as industrial, as it does most of this Bowes Road area. So obviously it doesn't contemplate specific things like utility buildings, but I wrote in here that I think a small utility building generally would fall within the realm of what would be considered an acceptable industrial use, even though it's almost municipal in nature. So I would consider it to be consistent with the master plan.
Any questions on standard F? All in favor of accepting standard F, please say aye.
Aye.
F is accepted.
So on the third page, we did recommend approval of the site plan subject to 5 conditions. Items 1 and 2 are the conditions that we put on everything. Item 3, if you're comfortable with what they've written about landscaping, you could eliminate that one. Item 4, I think we can, again, there's going to be one motion sensor light on the building. If you would like additional details, we can certainly ask for those as far as what type of light it is. But otherwise, you could probably eliminate number 4. And then number 5, I will just add a fire department to that list. We'll just insert that after city engineer.
Andy, number 4 there, if lighting is desired, they've indicated that they're going to do some kind of lighting possibly, or signage with lighting. That would still go before you, correct?
Yes, so they would.
Let's leave that in there then, for just that reason.
Yeah, so when they want to do, we can just ask them for, usually we just ask for a simple cut sheet of what the fixture will look like, so it's generally downward facing.
Yeah.
Same thing with the sign, if they want to put up a sign on the side of the building, they can certainly do that, but they'll just have to send us a rendering of it prior to with some dimensions, so you can make sure that.
Exactly, so it seems to me as though that's a good thing,
Okay.
just leave it in there.
Yep.
At that point. So we're eliminating 3? Correct?
Yes, assuming the planning commission does not want to require further landscaping on the property.
Everybody okay with landscaping as laid out by the VP Fiber? That they're actually proposing some, so let's let them do that. We don't see anything wrong with that. And then the 5, we're just adding the fire department.
Yep, so we would insert that after city engineer.
And then can I have a motion to approve the site plan of the 2560 Bowes Road?
I'll make a motion that we approve the site plan for 2560 Lowell Road.
I can support, and with the so mentioned amendments. Any discussion? Sue, roll call, please.
Commissioner Cadwalder,
Yep.
Commissioner Chambers,
Yes.
Commissioner Plank,
Yes.
Commissioner Strautman,
Yes.
Commissioner Ellis is absent, and Chair Barker.
Aye. Yes. Their site plan is approved. And discussion of acceptable building materials, what is that?
So there was a lot on, it was on Bowes Road, and I forget the cross street, but there's a corner lot there, undeveloped. And somebody had purchased it, and their desire was to build what they refer to as a straw house. And so there was some questions about it from the building department was not comfortable with those particular materials. They were asking if in zoning, is there anything that would prevent someone from building a house out of something like that? And I said, no, not really. And so we decided that this is something that we should discuss at the planning commission. Basically, is there, I guess, does the planning commission desire to regulate or prescribe materials for buildings? Because, as we've seen, there are some things that people are building that are unconventional, let's say. I think, a straw house would fall into that category. And if you would like to leave it open and allow people to do whatever, that's one way to do it. Otherwise, we could add language to the ordinance that would specifically require them to, I don't know what the exact language it would be, but basically make them build the house out of conventional or reasonably conventional materials. So that's kind of the short version of it. I don't know, Mike, is there anything that I missed in the?
I can elaborate a little bit more. As Andy said, that we did have an issue where we had a house that was coming into the city that was built out of straw bale. And at the time, when they when the building department was doing the review, PCI, they basically required extra inspections onto the home and requirements that they needed to meet because they did not believe that this type of material would be able to withstand a Michigan winter in one aspect, and the other aspect is they just had a number of safety concerns with it because this is something that might be more prevalent in a warmer climate. and not something in our climate. And so, I did reach out to some other communities, find out, other city managers, find out if any of them have dealt with this, and it was kind of when I put it out there, it was kind of, there were a lot of jokes about it. But, we kind of all referred back to our building code. The building code does restrict this in a sense because of the fact that the restrictions that the building official's putting on it, they have the ability to do that. They have ability to deny it. There is enough teeth in the building code that they can just deny these when they come up. So I'm not so necessarily sure. I don't know if that's really where the planning commission really wants to go down as to dictating what materials. I'm not sure that's where you want to go on this, especially when the building code there is a lot of flexibility with the building official and the building code as to how to handle these situations.
Things tend to change over the course of the years.
Right.
As far as building goes, and what's maybe bad 10 years ago could be great now.
Right.
Whatever the reason.
And vice versa, something bad now could be good 10 years ago.
Exactly. So I guess my take on it is, as long as the building code is enforceable and everybody is on the same page with it, I don't see us trying to delve into building materials.
I think they've got it covered on that.
Yeah, seems like that, doesn't it? Yeah, let's pass on that then for right now. Anything else on that?
No, sir, that's it.
I mean, we'd be happy to look at something if there was some concrete that, so to speak, that would require action. But
Right.
I don't think at this point it's.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that they ended up withdrawing their application
Correct.
anyway, so it's not going to be
It's
constructed.
going to be, the inspections were going to be very costly for them to the point where they couldn't do the project.
Right, okay. Commissioner, or staff report. Discussion on projects.
This is something that Tony Ellis actually brought up,
Uh-huh.
and he's referring to maybe a little bit more discussion with our staff reports, such as the Burger King project,
Mm-hmm.
where it was approved, the site plan was approved by the planning commission, but yet, it did take quite a while for that project to begin, and so he just would like periodic updates as to what the status is, do we have any updates, and obviously now that project has begun,
Right.
but he wanted just a little bit more discussion on some of our projects that are approved.
And all of the site plans have 1 year, is that not correct, before they come before us for renewal? Or?
Yeah, so they're
1 year, isn't it?
the site plan approval is valid for 1 year, and then if nothing happens in a year, they can come in before that first year expires and ask for a 6-month extension of their approval. If they don't do anything within that 6-month extension, then
Start all over.
exactly, they have to come back in for a site plan review. So-
Two examples of that. One would be the Snyder Manor.
Yep, they'll be coming back here.
They did come back, took an extension, and still didn't have the funds.
Could get their grant.
Yeah. So then the other example is the gentleman that's building the house behind the church down there. He was going to build, I think, 3 or something like that, 2 or 3. Remember that? And he just started here not too. It was close to the 1 year when he started, I would guess. I don't know. I'd have to go back to my memory bank to figure that one out. But so it's not unusual, I don't think, for people to take, like Burger King.
Was then it was weather related with.
Well, you would
to
assume so.
start.
Yeah. I mean, it seems logical. So in that case, there is a 1 year period, and I don't know